Hello all, this is Al Finch. Today I'm going to continue my Figure of Interest series, the focus on a creature that some of you may know fairly well. Here before us we've got S. Peterson's Field Guide to Lovecraftian Horrors. It's one of the field guides I like to refer to from time to time. I think the illustrations and such are pretty beautifully illustrated. It's like the 7th edition that was published in 2020. And the creature of interest today is the Ithaqua, the Great Windwalker, or better known perhaps as the Wendigo. So here, all right, we have kind of the, I guess, Lovecraftian style interpretation of Ithaqua or the Wendigo. This is different than the incarnation that I think I first encountered in pop culture. But in any case, this is the one that's probably better known, at least amongst game players and horror aficionados. Kind of a bizarre wind or air elemental that stalks the frozen wastes. They have certain things tend to be the same about Wendigo, even though it's been shown in many different forms. One is that it has the ability to perhaps transform others into versions of itself. And it also has cannibalistic tendencies. This one, all right, is pretty cool and pretty horrific. The version, though, that I was introduced to was maybe a little less so. Here is another handbook that I like to kind of refer to from time to time. This is the official handbook of the Marvel Universe Deluxe Edition, issue number 14 that was published in 1987. The version of the Wendigo character that I became familiar with, I first saw in comics. So let's see if I can find it here. The Wendigo is a character that I believe I first saw in a reprint of a key issue of the Incredible Hulk. His first appearance in the Marvel Universe actually was in Incredible Hulk number 162. And his origin is that he's a transformed human who was cursed when he committed an act of cannibalism. And he essentially ended up becoming this gigantic Sasquatch-like being who, according to the handbook, is nearly as powerful and as tough as the Incredible Hulk. Again, like the other version of the Wendigo, the Ithaqua, he's associated with the cold north wastelands, the Canadian North Woods in this case. And I said that I had seen him in a reprint of a key issue. Well, as it turns out, in Incredible Hulk number 180 and 181, the Wendigo is fighting the Hulk, and it also happens to be during that fight where the character of Wolverine is first introduced as well. So, you know, I'm fairly certain you all are familiar with Wolverine. So, in any case, this Wendigo is associated with Native American folklore, and shows up in lots of stories, in comic books, movies, in literature in general. So pop culture references. One of my more recent discoveries was Algernon Blackwood, who probably has the best Wendigo story that I've read. Literally the story that Algernon Blackwood published in his collection of stories. It says The Lost Valley and Other Stories in 1910 was called The Wendigo. You can find relatively inexpensive versions to acquire. This Ancient Sorceries and Other Weird Stories version came out in, I think, like 2002, and it's still readily available on the market. It's a Penguin classic, after all. It's also found in other collections that have more Wendigo stories in them. The Wendigo story in here's a standalone. If you're lucky enough to come across this Call of Cthulhu Chaosium book from the 1990s, I believe, 1998, the Ithaqua Cycle, you'll find Algernon Blackwood's original story in here, as well as 13 other related tales, including the one where, essentially the Wendigo is introduced into the Cthulhu mythos. Algernon Blackwood was liked by Lovecraft, but I don't believe that the Wendigo was necessarily introduced into his canon until later on. There are other books that I've read that I really enjoy with the Wendigo as an antagonist or creature to fear. The Wendigo from Algernon Blackwood is probably the best, but my second favorite doesn't come from the collection from Chaosium. It actually is in this old gem. This is Monster Tales, which is a collection of various horror stories edited by Robert Bloch in 1973. And within this book, I encountered this as a young person, is the story of the Wendigo's Child by Thomas F. Monteleone. This is one that just scared the hell out of me. Remember reading it, and it's a story about a young man in Arizona, of all places, so not set in the frozen north like many of the other Wendigo adventures are. But it does involve Native Americans in Native American culture, where this kid goes in and starts messing around on a construction site and ends up finding a bizarre mummy, which, as kids in horror stories are wont to do, so instead of leaving it alone, he drags this thing back to his place and starts messing around with it. Needless to say, the story doesn't necessarily have a happy ending for the kid. If you can track it down, I think it's well worth it. It has a number of other kind of cool stories alongside of it. I don't know that this one's in print these days. I found mine kind of luckily secondhand at, I think, like a half-price books or some such. All right, well, now you've got a little bit of background about the Wendigo. Oh, I should probably mention a movie. Even though there are probably a large number of horror films that feature the Wendigo, probably one even literally named the Wendigo, I haven't seen any of them. But I will say this, going back to Algernon Blackwood and his original story, if you want something that gives you the feel that I got from reading his version of the Wendigo, which was very much an unseen spirit that would swirl around you and possess you, I would say the best bet is actually the Evil Dead movies, the original ones. Evil Dead 2, the scene around the cabin where you get from the perspective of whatever this evil presence is that's afflicting Ash and his friends. When you're getting that camera view, it's how I kind of imagined how the Wendigo would move about and torment its victims. And so there you go. That's my movie recommendation alongside some of the literature. Check out the Evil Dead series. Evil Dead 2, I think, came out in 1987, was directed by Sam Raimi. Well worth your time. Okay, now let's get to the game stuff. So it's going to be obvious as heck, but Call of Cthulhu is going to have stats for Ithaqua or the Wendigo in its various editions, right? Right here, Ithaqua, the Windwalker, or the Wendigo, a great old one. Lots of information and stats and how to use him. Not much trouble translating him for gameplay at all. Dungeons and Dragons, it's a little more difficult, but there are creatures that can fit. If you're wanting to play with the Wendigo in a Dungeons and Dragons setting, I would look up Windwalkers. These are along the lines of the weird spirits or elementals, that ride the howling winds and torment people. If you prefer something less like the disembodied spirit or elemental version, maybe you like the Sasquatch version, you of course can also just choose to play with the Yeti. There are stats for both of these in the monster manuals. So yeah, Dungeons and Dragons, also not difficult to find the statistics and how to play those particular creatures. Marvel Superheroes is another obvious place where you'll probably want to consider playing the Wendigo, maybe as a villain to fight against your stronger characters. I know there's a lot of online resources for this, but I think if you don't have access to them, maybe you only have, your old box set. My suggestion is take a good close look at The Thing, which they give you the stats for in that box set. His stats are on par with the Hulk, maybe slightly less. And, well, that's kind of what they say the Wendigo is in the Marvel Universe official handbook, right? They say he's almost as strong as the Hulk, almost as strong, almost as hard to hurt. I think that's what they also would say about The Thing. So you can reskin the statistics for The Thing, or I'm certain online, I know that there's like a whole website dedicated to Marvel superheroes. I'll try and include it in the notes so that people can reference it. You can probably find the stats for Wendigo somewhere in there as well. So yeah, we've got all of these options for playing the Wendigo. Him being considered part of the Cthulhu Mythos, you'll find him in other games. I'm certain that Cthulhu Death May Die has a version of him that you can use in the game. I haven't looked through some of my Arkham horror sets, but I bet that there's a version of Ithaqua in there as well. Finally, I'd like to wrap up with how you might make a theme deck based on the Wendigo for Magic the Gathering. So we'll pause for a moment so we can get in close and discuss, this deck that I've made. All right, so this is a commander deck, and you may notice that there isn't a Wendigo-style commander, but I think there's something that kind of fits the bill, at least to help the Wendigo come into play, and that is Yorn, God of Winter. So this is the commander for the deck. It comes out for 2 generic mana and 1 green, and it says, whenever Yorn attacks, untap each snow permanent you control. And he's a 3/3, which doesn't seem all that impressive until you notice that he's a double-sided card. On the opposite side, we have Cauldring, the Rhyme Staff. This is a legendary snow artifact that comes out for a single generic mana, a blue, and a black. And this one reads, you may play target snow permanent card from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield tapped. I figured that since the Wendigo is a creature of frozen wastes, that a winter-themed or a snow-themed deck would fit well with it. So what might I include in such a deck? Well, obviously cards that represent the cold, the Wall of Frost, for instance. I think it's a nice foreboding scene in the art, which is kind of what I imagine when I was thinking about the frigid mountainsides and, the northern parts of the United States and Canada. I also would include some natural creatures. I figured the Wendigo had its, major appearance alongside the Wolverine. We might as well throw a Wolverine pack in here from the old legends. 2/4 creature that has Rampage 2. Not particularly good. I'm going to go ahead and say this is very much a theme deck, unless a powerful deck. I'm going to say probably tier 2 at best. Of course, the classic Grizzly Bears, which are also, I think they fit right along, right, with the art here. They could almost fit together in some ways. Same artist, Jeff Menges. I probably butchered that name. My apologies to the artist. Another natural creature, Trickster's Elk. I think good to have some creature removal even in a low tier deck. This thing, you can bestow as an enchantment creature for 1 green, 1 colorless onto another creature, and that turns it into 3/3 green elk that loses all of its abilities. So good for kind of shutting down a nasty opposing commander if needed. And it comes out for 1 green and 2 generic mana for a 3/3, so it's not an awful body in its own right. Another classic, Arctic Wolves from the Weatherlight. It's not a great card, but I like the way it looks. Again, the creepy setting with the full moon, the wolves chasing you. 3 generic mana, 2 green, 4/5. When it comes into play, you draw a card. I'll go ahead and let a secret loose. There's a blink effect or 2 in this deck. So having the ability to make this thing pop in and out of play might give you some chance to get some decent card draws. Here's the hidden commander. There is a Wendigo creature. It's not legendary. They call it the Wendigo. It's 3 colorless or 3 generic and 3 green mana to get out. And when it comes into play, it's going to have 6 +1/+1 counters on it. During your upkeep, you put a +1/+1 counter on the Wendigo. If it blocked or was blocked in a previous turn, and this a counter is removed if it didn't do that. So it can either grow or shrink depending on how aggressively you use it, and it's a 0/0 to begin with. So not a great creature, but it fits into the interpretation of the Wendigo being a giant, bloodthirsty Yeti-like creature pretty well. Flavor win, if not a particularly good card. I picked other creatures that fit the flavor of the Wendigo to go along with it. The Bergstrider, which is a giant wizard, when it comes into play, you can tap an artifact or a creature an opponent controls, and snow mana was spent this way to cast it. That permanent doesn't untap. It's a 4/4 for 4 generic mana and a blue. The Frostpeak Yeti. So we're going to include a Yeti in here. Another snow creature, so that it goes along with the effect from Cauldring. This thing is a 3/3 that comes in for 3 generic and a single blue. You spend 1 generic and a snow mana, then it can't be blocked this turn. This actually could be a pretty good win condition with some of the other cards in here. You like the idea of the Wendigo being more of an elemental. I've included the Frostwalker. This is a 4/1 that comes in for a single generic and blue, and if it becomes the target of a spell or ability, you sacrifice it. I really just like the way it looks. If I could see the Wendigo that was in the original story, this is kind of how I would imagine it, how it would manifest. I think this is a nice, interesting creature for the deck, a legendary snow creature, shapeshifter Morit of the Frost, 2 generic, 1 green, 2 blue, changeling, which means it has all creature types, so technically a Yeti or an elemental, I guess both. And this one says you can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a permanent you control. It's legendary and snow in addition to all of its other types. And if it's a creature, it enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it and has changeling. I like this as a ambiguous spirit that can kind of steal your form, right? Because that is one of the aspects. Not only does the Wendigo consume you, but it can imitate you and maybe even turn you into it. We're throwing some evil undead. Yeah, so, I mentioned Evil Dead 2. Might as well pay some homage to that with Nerfy, but the Betrayer King, legendary snow creature, zombie wizard. Comes in for 3 generic, 1 blue, 1 black. It says, other snow and zombie creatures you control get +1/+1. Spend 3 snow mana, return Nerfy Betrayer King from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And it's a 4/3. So he's good at pumping your other snow creatures. Gangrenous zombies. I just really enjoy the art on this one, alongside the fact that it likes snow-covered swamps, which you'll have in this deck. 1 generic, 2 black. Zombies, sacrifice gangrenous zombies to have it deal a damage to each creature and player, or if you control any snow-covered swamps, which you will, gangrenous zombie instead deal 2 damage to each creature and player. So kind of a minor board sweeper effect attached to this. Borrow Ghoul, 1 generic and 1 black, another zombie, a 4/4, so beefy, but at the cost of during your upkeep, remove the top creature card in your graveyard from the game or bury a Borrow Ghoul. I will tell you there's heavy mill effects waiting further on, so feeding that Rhyme Staff again. You need stuff in your graveyard. There's cards in here that let you dump cards in your graveyard so you can play the best ones using the Rhyme Staff. We've got the Ashen Ghoul, a classic from Ice Age. Again, just fits those creepy, evil undead spirits, cannibalizing things in the snow theme. 1 black, 3 generic. Ashen Ghoul can attack the turn it comes into play. It says Summon Ghoul on this, but I believe it's been Oracle errataed to zombie. Spend 1 black, return Ashen Ghoul to play under your control. Use this ability only at the end of your upkeep and only if Ashen Ghoul is in your graveyard with at least 3 creature cards above it. Yep, so I'm pretty happy I got to meet Ron Spencer briefly. I managed to get his signature. I really love his art. I think, unfortunately, he may have passed recently, so I'm glad to showcase a little bit of his art in here. Priest of the Haunted Edge. We have 1 colorless, 1 black for a snow creature zombie cleric. This one's going to be great reusable creature kill. You can bring it back with that Rhyme Staff. The Rhyme Staff, of course, can cast it over and over again. If you tap and sacrifice Priest of the Haunted Edge, target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of snowlands you control. Activate this anytime you could cast a sorcery. It's a 0/4. So a little bit of a blocker early on and good at getting rid of even indestructible creatures later in the game. Will be plenty of snowlands in play from this deck for sure. Playing off of this graveyard manipulation and having a full graveyard, I've got Keru, the Lich Lord, 3 generic, a black, a green, and a blue. Creature, zombie, wizard. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can pay 2 generic and 1 black. If you do, you return the creature card at random from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains flying, trample, and haste. Exile the card at the beginning of your next step. If it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. This is how, if I end up milling some of my non-snow creatures like the Wendigo, I could potentially get them back. And I feel like giving this guy flying, trample, and haste makes it feel like a crazy spirit that's whirling over your head in the treetops, waiting to devour you. So I really like the flavor that imparts. I'm going to set these off to the side because I'm going to keep referring to the rhyme staff here, I'm sure. I've got some blink effect items in here. So if you can blink something like this guy brings out, you can keep it in play. It's a nice little workaround of this kind of weird version of Unearth. Sometimes you just got to support the theme. I don't think of crabs necessarily as being the most intimidating or interesting creatures, but the iceberg Cancrix, 1 generic, 1 blue, comes out cheap. It's a 0/4, and every time I have another stone permanent entering the battlefield under my control, I can have a target player, probably me, put the top 2 cards of the library into the graveyard. So that's one of the first mill effects there. Other mill effects include Gurmag, Nightwatch. I got to throw in some human victims in here somewhere, right? It can't all be evil elementals and yetis and undead. It's got this weird hybrid thing where it can be 2 generic and 2 and green, or 2 generic black, 2 generic blue. Your choice. When it enters, you look at the top 3 cards of your library. You can put one of the cards on top of your library and put the rest in your graveyard. 3/3. We have Native American influences, so I've tried to include cards that fit that theme. Here's the Patient Naturalist. Human Scout. When it enters the battlefield, you mill 3 cards, put a land from them into your hand, and if you can't, you get a treasure token. 1 green and 2 generic to bring in for a 2/3. A little bit of acceleration if you hit it in the right combination. More acceleration, this time a snow creature, the Centaur Omen Reader from Future Sight. 1 green and 3 generic for Centaur Shaman, 3/3, as long as it's tapped. Creature spells you play cost 2 less to play. Help get some of those old clunky cards out a little faster if I've got this in play. Glittering Frost, another snow permanent that we can bring out of the graveyard with the rhyme staff. 2 generic, 1 green, snow enchantment. You enchant the land and the land becomes snow. There's a handful of lands that are snow in the deck. That aren't snow, rather. And whenever enchanted land's tapped 4 mana, its controller adds an additional mana of any color. So some more ramp. We have Sculptor of Winter, which is an elf that lets you untap target snowland to help you accelerate, as well as the Boreal Druid, another elf that can tap to add 1 snow mana to your mana pool because it is a snow creature. It's essentially a Llanowar for snow decks. A Llanowar elf, 1/1, provides you with mana. Rhyme Tender. This one is, I think, a little bit stronger than the Sculptor of Winter in that it untaps a snow permanent and not just a snow land, but it's otherwise very much a similar card. The Replicating Ring. This one's a lot of text for, I don't think, a lot of action, but it's snow, a snow artifact, so I decided to include it. 3 generic. When this comes out, you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color And at the beginning of your upkeep, put a night counter on Replicating Ring. Then if there are 8 or more night counters on it, remove all of them and create 8 colorless snow artifact tokens named Replicating Ring with tap to add 1 mana of any color. So it reproduces itself. I don't ever expect that to actually happen in the game. I just want something that I can play out of the graveyard. Cold Steel Heart, I think a little better. Just 2 generic mana. It does enter the battlefield tapped, but you can choose a color and then you can tap it for any 1 mana of the chosen color later on. I expect that there's going to be a lot of land that we're going to be bringing back with the Rime Staff. So I want to have things that let me get extra land drops. Rites of Flourishing might be such a card. Here it's an enchantment, 2 generic, 1 green. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card, and then each player may play an additional land on each of his or her turns. I'm going to probably have access to extra lands, and so I'm hoping that this will help me get them deployed. Same goes for Gaia's Touch. 2 green for an enchantment. This one lets you put an additional land into play on each of your turns as long as it's a basic forest. I can sacrifice it to also add 2 green to my mana pool. So if I'm not hitting my land or I need a quick boost, it's pretty good short term. Avenging Druid, this helps ramp, but also helps get a bunch of stuff into the graveyard. 2 generic, 1 green for a druid, probably eroded to a human or an elf at this point. It's a 1/3. If Avenging Druid damages any opponent, you can reveal cards from your library until you reveal a land card. Put that land into play and put all other revealed cards into your graveyard. So I want to get snow permanents other than a land. This guy might help me. Kind of fitting into kind of these classic Native American style themes is Shamanic Revelation. 3 generic mana, 2 green. Draw a card for each creature you control when you cast the sorcery. Also, you gain 4 life for each creature you control if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. More card draw related to snow. The Frost Augur, 1 blue, snow creature, human wizard. It's a 1/2. You can spend 1 snow mana, tap it to look at the top card of your library, and if it's a snow card, you can reveal it and put it into your hand. Blessing of the Frost. This one is 3 generic, 1 green, snow sorcery. Distribute X +1/+1 counters against any number of creatures you control, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast it. So more card draw that deals with snow. You can't cast it, unfortunately, using the Rime Staff, but it does work in the snow deck. 3 Seasons lets me mill cards and return snow permanents from the graveyard to my hand as it progresses. And then if there are non-snow cards that I want back in my deck, I can shuffle them in. Druidic Ritual, you're going to see a bunch of mill cards here that let you select cards and then dump things into your graveyard. So in that theme, we have Druidic Ritual, Bitter Revelation, Winding Way. I tried to pick creepy art, right, for a lot of these. Tapping at the Window, Glacial Revelation. This one's a pretty good one. Reveal the top 6 cards of the library. Put any number of snow permanents from among them into your hand and put the rest in your graveyard. So you're going to hit a decent number of snow items, probably lands, but still. See the Unwritten. This one lets you play a creature card from among the top 8 cards of your library. It's a 4 generic and 2 green to cast. If you happen to have a creature already in play with power 4 or greater, you can put 2 creature cards in the battlefield this way instead of 1. You probably knew it. If you watched my Baba Yaga, you knew that I had the card Cannibalize, and well, gee, Wendigo is known to be a cannibalistic spirit. We're going to have the Cannibalize card in here again. 1 generic, 1 black, sorcery. Choose 2 target creatures controlled by any one player. Remove 1 of those creatures from the game and put 2 +1/+1 counters on the other. It's just a pet card of mine. I like the fact that it removes the creature from the game. I think it's a fair trade if you're getting rid of some big, giant, indestructible, nasty thing. And yeah, you buff your minor utility creature with those +1/+1 counters. Shape of the Wendigo. This is a fun card. It didn't come out in Ice Age. It came out in, what was that, Cold Snap. 3 generic, 3 green enchantment aura. When it comes into play, put 6 +1/+1 counters on enchanted creature. And it has the same clause. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on enchanted creature. If it attacked or blocked, since your last upkeep. Otherwise, you remove a +1/+1 counter from it. It is a callback to that classic Wendigo card from earlier. It's pretty funny. It basically is the same casting cost, but it buffs a pre-existing creature. I like the idea of having all these +1/+1 counters floating around too. If I can blink this or recast it or copy it, I have those options in this deck. We can pile lots of counters on a particular creature to make it pretty menacing. Continuing with the idea of transformation, right? The shape of the Wendigo has a creature turning into the Wendigo. Beast Within also kind of mimics this idea, right? Everybody knows this card by now, but if you don't, 2 generic, 1 green, instant, destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token, mainstay of EDH or Commander. And I think it fits the theme well, as does Ice Prison. This is an older card from Ice Age, 2 blue for an enchantment. When it comes into play, you get to remove a target creature from the game. This is not an effect that blue really gets much of anymore. Icy Prison leaves play, return the creature to play under its owner's control as though it were just summoned. A lot like a lot of the more white effects that we see, where they trap or exile a creature until things are removed. This one does have a weird quirk. During your upkeep, destroy Icy Prison. Any player may pay 3 to prevent it. I like the idea of like dumping this on the table, getting rid of a big creature that is annoying but you don't care too much about, and then looking at one of your other opponents that would really hate to see that creature come back and saying, would you like to pay the 3 to make sure it doesn't come back? Another option too is to use it on one of your own creatures, one that might be fun to blink in and out or reset. Then your opponents might decide that they want to tie up their own mana just to make sure it never returns. I like forcing other players to make interesting decisions like that. Flash Freeze. You might be wondering why this is in here. It fits the theme, but it's not a great card because it's a counter spell that just counters target red or green spells. If you're not playing against somebody with red or green, you might get upset. I will tell you, I've got some potential ways to get around that in here. But, you know, at a bare minimum, green cards, green is a mainstay in Commander. I expect there to be a green player at almost any table, so I'm not too worried about it being a dead card. Same goes with Deathmark. I just couldn't leave it out. Look at that picture. It just fits the theme too well. Single black sorcery, destroy target green or white creature. Fitting more of the winter theme, we've got Winter's Grasp for 1 green or 1 generic and 2 green. Sorcery, destroy a target land. Creepy Foreboding, Arctic Wasteland. Icy Blast, Wendigo is a wind elemental. I needed to include something in here that kind of shows that off. It's just a single blue and X generic. Tap X target creatures, and if you control creature power 4 or greater, the creatures don't untap. Living Death, this is just, a mass creature destruction, a board sweeper. There are probably better fits in terms of theme. Blood on the Snow could be included. I just don't happen to have that. And I do like the fact that Living Death is something that exiles and sacrifices things. Living Death, 3 generic, 2 black, sorcery. Each player exiles all creature cards from the graveyard and then sacrifices all creatures he or she controls, then puts all cards he or she exiled this way onto the battlefield. Just a good old-fashioned wrath-style spell that if you're filling your graveyard, hopefully you'll come out ahead. Dead of Winter is a good thing that cares about snow as a mass sweeper. 2 generic, 1 black, sorcery. All non-snow creatures get -X in the turn, where X is the number of snow permanents you control. Great sweeper if you're playing a snow deck and you're worried about dealing with indestructible permanents. This will take out a lot of those. Nature's Ruin, not a great card necessarily because the deck that I'm playing does have some green creatures, isn't it? Basically 2 generic, 1 black, destroy all green creatures. But I couldn't leave it out. Between the kind of, frozen, desolate scene and the flavor text, 1 chill blast, the exhalation of the grave. This is just a great fit, in my opinion. And like I said, I do have something that can help with these color-locked spells that we'll eventually see. Isochron Scepter. I'm already wielding a Rhyme Staff. Why not add in a Scepter as well? If you don't know this one, this is a powerful card. 2 generic mana for an artifact. Imprint. When Isochron Scepter comes into play, you may remove an instant card with converted mana cost 2 or less in your hand from the game. You can spend 2 and tap it and copy an imprinted instant card, then play the copy without paying its mana cost. What have I got to copy it? Well, I got a bunch of stuff. This card is a complete flavor win. The Winds of Calcisma, 1 generic, 1 green, instant. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Ferocious. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, instead prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. Fog effects are good in EDH or Commander. And the fact that this one shows a Yeti, Wendigo-like creature taking advantage of these blowing winds, it just fits into this, creepy element of the Wendigo being a creature of the wind and using it to terrify his prey. Reclaim. We put that on the Isochron Scepter so that we can bring back any non-snow cards that end up going into the graveyard over and over and over again. Thermal Flux. This one lets you turn things into snow or remove snow types from permanents until end of turn. And it lets you draw a card. At a bare minimum, right, you can dump this on the Scepter and turn this into spend 2, draw a card. I think it's worthwhile in the deck. I really like this one. It doesn't fit thematically, but mechanically it's just a knockout. Teferi's Time Twist. 1 generic, 1 blue, instant. Exile target permanent that you control. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. It enters the battlefield. If it enters the battlefield as a creature, it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. I can just imagine using this to reset the Wendigo itself, or use it to bounce the shape of the Wendigo in on a creature multiple times to make the creature get +6/+6 every time. 6 more additional +1/+1 counters. It just feels like fun. Can also be used to just save various permanents, right? And if somebody doesn't like your Isochron Scepter and tries to target it, well, it can save the Scepter. You won't get the Time Twist back, but you'll get a different card, hopefully, reset. Here's one of the fixes for those color-locked cards. Sway of Illusion, 1 generic, 1 blue, instant. Any number of target creatures become the color of your choice till end of turn. Draw a card. Bare minimum, it is a card draw spell that you can play over and over again on the Scepter. Occasionally, you'll surprise your opponents with it by hitting their stuff with stuff that you couldn't normally target them with. Bioshift, since I'm playing with +1/+1 counters, and let's face it, a pretty crappy creature that generates a ton of +1/+1 counters but can get chump blocked all day, I want to move those counters around. 1 hybrid green-blue instant, move any number of +1/+1 counters from target creature onto another target creature with the same controller. If you can blink your Wendigo and bioshift it, you can move those counters onto a place where they might do more good. I just like the look of this card too. Another transformational art, right? The guy is turning into a monster, much like we see as a theme in the Wendigo. Perilous Research is another cold snap card. I always like this one. It says, draw 2 cards and sacrifice a permanent. It's an instant blue card that costs 1 generic, 1 blue. Not great, but on the other hand, if you're constantly pulling things like snowlands out of your graveyard, maybe it doesn't hurt so much to sacrifice the occasional snowland to dig a couple cards deep, and it fits on the scepter, so it's reusable. If you're about to lose a permanent to removal of some kind, you can use the scepter to cast the Perilous Research in response. So I find that's a pretty good combo. Midnight Tilling, this is just another mill card that can be reused on the scepter as well. We're nearing the end, folks. If you've stayed with me, I appreciate you being willing to listen to me babble about a pet deck. We have our snow-covered swamps, snow-covered islands, and snow-covered forests in here. If you want to know the exact ratio, I'm going to have a link in the notes to my Moxfield list. We also have the dual lands that are snow, things like the Ice Tunnel, which is the island swamp, and the Rimewood Falls, which is the forest island. We've got cold-themed lands like Tendo Ice Bridge, and, well, you know, we got to throw a command tower in. It is a 3-color deck after all. An oldie and not so great, but I still like it, Ice Flow. This card, if you've never heard of it, and I suspect you haven't, is a land. You may choose not to untap it during your untap phase. You can tap it and tap a creature without flying that's attacking you. As long as the Ice Flow remains tapped, that creature does not untap during its controller's untap phase. Good for locking down annoying attacking creatures that you can't otherwise get rid of. Shimmerdrift Vale, Mouth of Ronan, Snowland that lets you deal damage to a creature if you spend 4 generic and 1 snow and sacrifice it. So some little, you know, damaging land effects there. Frostwalk Bastion, another snowland that you can turn into a creature. Got to give those humans some place to live, right? I think that's it, right? I would like to hear your thoughts on any of this stuff. Have you all, you know, read any of the Wendigo-themed stories, watched any of the Wendigo horror movies, and have recommendations for me? You got ideas for improving the deck? I'd love to hear them. Go ahead and put those in the comments below. I think I've hit the end of this current video, so ta-ta for now.